As the ASEAN-Japan summit was being brought to a close, and the chair of the meeting, Prime Minister Hun Sen, was about to finish his concluding remarks, President Aquino raised his hand, and he was acknowledged, and he made a significant intervention. This is what the President said. There were several views expressed yesterday on ASEAN unity, which we did not realize will be translated into an ASEAN consensus. For the record, this was not our understanding. The ASEAN route is not the only route for us. As a sovereign state, it is our right to defend our national interests. The chair, Prime Minister Hun Sen, duly acknowledged the statement of President Aquino, and he said that this will be reflected in the record of the meeting. Now for context, when the Prime Minister was making his concluding remarks, I was taking down notes. So I will refer to my notes. He observed that in the Korean Peninsula there are pressing challenges, and there was a need to ease the tension and for the parties to exercise self-restraint, to abide by the UN Charter and international law. So he was referring to the tensions in one part of the region. Then he went on to discuss the South China Sea. He said that the member states should also the countries of ASEAN and other countries must exercise utmost restraint and use the means of peaceful dialogue. He pointed out that ASEAN has a solid document, which is the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties, the DOC, which was promulgated in 2002, and that there are guidelines to implement, which are the 6-point principles. And then he mentioned an ASEAN-China framework. And it was at this point that I noticed the President raised his hand to make the intervention. So that is the context of what happened. You may wish to ask questions now.
What is that ASEAN-China framework about?
Well, if you recall our discussion yesterday, in all of the statements of the heads of state, and even the statement of the chairman, there was a mention of the DOC, the Code of Conduct, as well as adherence to international law, and the UN Code on the Law of the Sea. So if the mention of international law or of the UN is already omitted, and there is specific focus on simply ASEAN and China, then that changes the whole context.
Sir, the fact that Prime Minister Hun Sen agreed to put it on the records, is that a positive development for us, that our position that the United Nations and other international laws track should not be excluded from our options?
Well, we must realize that this is a forum where the countries around the table are sovereign states. It's not just the individual heads of state or heads of government that are representing themselves. They're representing their countries. For our president, he is representing the state, the government. And our state, our government, is governed by a constitution. And under the constitution, we need to assert our sovereignty. And that is the way our president believes, that we are asserting our sovereignty. That in a forum like this, we must point out with clarity and with firmness that we would like to to the provisions of our Constitution on sovereignty to be affirmed and to be respected. And he already laid the framework for this in his opening statement. And this is consistent with all the statements he has made on this issue, that there should be ASEAN centrality, and even as we observe ASEAN centrality, this is an issue that involves the stake of each of the member states of ASEAN concerned, no, that have claims, no, on the disputed territory, and that we are affirming our belief that this matter should be resolved peacefully and in accordance with international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So it is important at every forum, and especially in an ASEAN summit, to affirm and reaffirm these principles, no, because it involves an issue of sovereignty.
Secretary,
Yes.
does the Philippines feel it was a deliberate act on Cambodia's part to misconstrue yesterday's discussion and issue a statement to make it sound that an agreement was reached when in fact there was none?
The President's statement speaks for itself. It is pointing out that the statement of the chairman is not consistent with his own recollection or with his own understanding of the context of what has been discussed so far. And he stated it plainly and simply. To repeat, he said there were several views expressed yesterday on ASEAN unity. And this was a recurring theme. But to state that there should be Asian-ASEAN unity does not preclude any country or any member state from asserting its national interest. So the President wanted to make that point very clear. It cannot be that the country, no, or its leader will just say that the country or himself is for unity without affirming certain vital principles, which would form part of the context now of what is being discussed.
Yes.
Did Hun Sen explicitly say that as the ASEAN neutrality means the exclusion of other parties?
That is the reason why I was reading from my notes. I do not want to imply or to attribute anything that was not actually said. Kaya binasa ko po yung mga notes ko on how he came up with that statement. Na he was talking about yung first sa Korean Peninsula, then he talked about South China Sea, he talked about the DOC, Code of Conduct, but then he mentioned yung term na ASEAN China, no? And then he was saying that there was a consensus, no? And that was the point at which the President raised his hand to make the intervention. So let us stick to the facts.
If the President did not intervene, kung hindi niya ginawa yun, what would have been possible consequences?
I don't think it is proper for me or for anybody to speculate. We're dealing here with heads of state. This is a very important issue. Let's just confine ourselves to what actually happened. I am not inclined to engage in speculation.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, let's just put this in proper context. That intervention was made by the President when Prime Minister Hun Sen was summarizing and about to close the meeting.
That is correct. He was about to adjourn. He was making his concluding remarks. And as I said, no, I was taking down notes and I shared with you the relevant notes I was taking para maunawaan ninyo yung buong context ng pangyayari. Kasi kung kukunin lang natin yung statement, no? Pagkatapos hindi maliwanag kung ano talaga yung naganap, baka engage tayo sa haka-haka, no? Eh hindi naman tama yung ganun.
But sir, on the agenda number 1, which is an exchange of views on regional and international issues, there were several countries that spoke about different issues. So, what was the Philippines country statement during the first agenda?
Okay, we will, as we have done, no, we will furnish you with a transcript of what the President actually said. But since you're asking me now, I will again read from my notes with your permission. Sinabi ng Pangulo, he said no, that we are now, may observation siya, no, from the ashes of war to being a beacon of progress, no, referring to Japan. No. Then he said we have to work to ensure peace and stability, ease tensions. The rule of law must be observed. He referred to the 1982 UNCLOS, which he referred to as a bedrock of engagement. We must resolve overlapping maritime claims. So yun yung mga sinabi ng Pangulo. No? Tapos yung ASEAN-Japan strategic roadmap for economic development. Essentially, yun yung mga bringing up ng Pangulo. A reiteration of basic principles. No?
So he actually raised also the South China Sea issue in the context of maritime security.
Hindi niya binanggit specifically ang South China Sea doon sa statement. Makikita niyo naman doon. Binanggit niya yung pag-ease ng tensions. Binanggit niya yung kahalagahan ng rule of law. Binanggit niya yung 1982 UNCLOS. At yung kahalagahan na ma-resolve yung overlapping maritime claims.
Were there other countries, sir, that also spoke on the South China Sea, for example, among claimant states like Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia, or they were just totally talking about different things?
Sige, titingnan ulit natin yung notes, no, para reliable, para hindi tayo
Kung Philippines
nabuhula.
lang yung the only one talking there in South China Sea.
Hindi naman.
Hindi naman.
Vietnam mentioned it again, no? Yung implement the DOC, 6-point principle, early formulation of the COC, freedom of navigation, peaceful resolution, 1982 UNCLOS. Nandun lahat yun sa statement ng Vietnam.
Sir, similarly, Japan is also having an issue on disputes with China. Was the issue of Senkaku raised in the ASEAN-Japan?
Hindi niya binanggit yun at all.
Sir, is the President making it a point to raise this issue in every summit with different countries itong maritime security?
Siguro mag-ano na lang tayo na let us just base it on facts. No? Saan niya sinabi at kung paano at kung bakit. And unawain natin yung konteksto. Kaysa yung gagawa tayo ng general statement na at every ganito sinasabi. Di ba? Mas mainam, unawain natin ano ba yung pagkakataon na yun, ano ba ang layunin ng pagpupulong na yun, no? At yung konteksto mismo ng sinabi ng ating Pangulo.
Secretary,
Yes.
the Philippines issued a letter to Cambodia clarifying that particular issue that the President raised during the ASEAN-Japan meeting. I'd like to know when the DFA issued the letter.
Okay, sandali lang Meron kaming communication ni Secretary Del Rosario. Tamang-tama yung tanong mo. Sabi niya sa akin, I have been receiving text queries, so I have responded as follows. Similar doon sa binasa ko. No? At the ASEAN retreat yesterday, this is Secretary Albert Del Rosario, various views were expressed on ASEAN unity, which were translated by the chair into an ASEAN consensus. This was not the understanding of both the Philippines and at least one other country. When the chair in the ASEAN-Japan meet alluded to this, si Prime Minister Hun Sen yun, di ba? The President indicated that the Philippines was not in accord, that while the Philippines was for ASEAN unity, it has the inherent right to defend its national interests when deemed necessary. Oh, and then, ito rin sinabi niya, the SFA, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, had also confirmed the Philippine position in a formal letter to the chair with copies to all ASEAN foreign ministers. That's Secretary Albert Del Rosario.
When did we issue that letter? Before the ASEAN-Japan summit started? Or did we issue it as early as last night?
Wala po akong facts tungkol dyan, kaya hindi ko sasagutin yan. Mag-focus lang tayo kung ano yung alam ko as factual. Okay? There is a letter. I don't have information dyan sa mga timeline na yan. Basta po, merong statement yung ating Pangulo. Kinonfirm ni Secretary Del Rosario na may sulat siya. Ngayon, kung mahalaga sa inyo yung mga sequence na, no, bigyan nyo ako ng pagkakataon na alamin. No?
So it's safe to assume that the President is aware of the letter that we gave Cambodia?
Ang nilalaman naman po nung sulat at yung sinabi ng ating Pangulo ay pareho.
Yes. I was just gonna ask why, if he knew about the letter already, why he didn't include that particular sentiment of the Philippines the first time that he spoke, because he already spoke before he. So.
Pakiulit lang. Tagalogin natin. Bakit kung alam niya yung sulat, hindi niya
Was it not included in the original statement that he was supposed to read?
Dun sa opening,
Sa
di ba raw
opening,
sinabi?
he was supposed to.
ganito mga kaibigan, ano? Sa bawat pagkakataon, merong angkop na pananalita. May angkop na statement na dapat gawin. No? So, do sa takdang panahon na maggagawa siya ng statement at the ASEAN-Japan Summit, pinili niyang gamitin yung mga katagang inaakala niyang pinakaangkop para doon. No? That is a decision which he, as a head of state, would make. No? That is the exercise of judgment. No? At hindi po yun para sa akin o para kanino na sabihin kung ano ba yung sa anong okasyon. No? I trust that we would grant, no, that in the exercise of his judgment, he would choose the right statement for the right occasion. Yan lang po masasabi ko dyan sa tanong ninyo.
The topic. Sir, regarding the statement that the ASEAN route is not the only route for us, would that be interpreted as sort of derailing the theme of ASEAN centrality? Since the whole point of this summit is to basically unify the ASEAN states, but the President is saying that it's not the only way for us.
Siguro naman po, pag binanggit natin yung phrase na ASEAN centrality, it is a general principle that has broad application that cannot be construed to apply only to a single issue. Di po ba? So siguro po wala namang inconsistency, no, na i-affirm yung ASEAN centrality samantalang ina-assert din, no, ina-affirm that as a sovereign state, no, we have the inherent right, no, to defend our national interests in the way that is appropriate, or that the leader of the country would deem to be appropriate.
So just to be very clear, what other routes is the President referring to?
Malinaw naman, ano, pag binasa natin lahat ng mga paulit-ulit na statement, mag-uumpisa sa DOC, pupunta sa COC, pupunta sa international law, pupunta sa UN Charter, pupunta sa UNCLOS. That is the entire universe of, di ba, yung mga konsepto at yung mga paraan ng pagre-resolve. Kaya kung biglang sasabihin na ASEAN, no, or ASEAN-China, ang immediate implication ay hindi isinasama yung kabuuan ng lahat ng mga option o lahat ng mga avenues for resolution na available sa isang estado katulad natin. No? Malinaw po ba yun? Yung pag-clarify na gano'n?
Baka naman sir, maisip ng China na this opens the way for the United States to again enter into the picture.
Wala po tayong karapatan na mag-isip para sa kanila. Hindi po nararapat para sa akin na magkomento kung ano iniisip nila.
Sir, maliban yun sa sinabi ni Vincent na have we put it on record, meron pa po ba yung dinagdag after dun sa
Well, in-acknowledge lang ni Prime Minister Hun Sen yung intervention ng Pangulo, and as he had requested that it be put on record, that indeed it will be put on the record. And shortly after that, the session was adjourned. Kasi nga, concluding statement na eh. No? So, para bang view it from the perspective of the presiding officer, you're making a concluding statement na sa dulo nun, ina-expect mo adjourn mo yung session, tapos nakita mo, merong pang participant na nagtaas ng kamay, kinilala mo yun. Pagkataas niya magsalita, sinabi na lang niya na, okay, we acknowledge it, it will be put on record. Shortly thereafter, in-adjourn na niya. Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about the ASEAN-Korea summit.
Okay, ASEAN-Korea Summit. Babasahin ko po ulit yung aking mga sinulat dito. Okay, ASEAN, ito po yung mga paulit-ulit na nabanggit, no? Ito yung mga main themes, no? I will just mention them, no? Connectivity, disaster management, people-to-people exchange, bridging the development gap. No? So marami pong mga elemento yan, no? Yung Ayan, tapos kasama din dyan, merong Korean-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, may strategic partnership, may Korean Center. Korea is ASEAN's second largest trading partner, second largest investment destination. The volume of trade between Korea and China, 130 billion in 2011, 150 billion by 2015. Ito, no, yung on the importance of reducing the development gap, these are the specific points that were mentioned. Enhanced support for Mekong region development, enhanced capacity for climate change response. Binanggit din yung tungkol sa forest cooperation, because Korea is hosting the Green Growth Technology Center. Okay, do sa aspect ng connectivity, he mentioned puro Korean president ito, ASEAN Cyber University, connectivity in education, Korean-ASEAN Transportation Roadmap. Tapos, he also noted positive changes in such as progress in democracy, in human rights in Myanmar, as well as the Bangsamoro Agreement. And then he ended by saying that binanggit niya yung challenge nila from North Korea. Yung challenge to UN yung sa Non-Proliferation Treaty to implement the Non-Proliferation Treaty with respect to nuclear arms, no? And close cooperation with the international community. Tapos yung for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to stop provocation, which was also mentioned by the President in his statement. Ito pala, sa President's statement, number 1, take a look at the mechanisms and the safeguards for combating human trafficking, information sharing on yung mga cross-border concerns. No? Then he lauded the Republic of Korea in its efforts to ensure the welfare of migrant workers. And described this to be a hallmark of compassion and as conveying a sense of mutual respect. Then he mentioned the importance of observing the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty while recognizing the right of nations to use nuclear power for peaceful purposes. And he said that the Philippines supports the calls for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to follow international rules and to abide by the inspection protocols of the IAEA, yung International Atomic Energy Association. Yun po, ang sa Korea. Gusto nyo pa yung sa ASEAN plus 3?
Sir, yung, I remember nag-aside si President Aquino with Vietnam.
Oo.
Ano tuloy po yun?
Mamaya na lang natin itanong.
Ay,
Mag-reserve muna kayo kasi meron pa naman kayong pagkakataon.
Kay ASEAN plus 3,
ASEAN plus 3 is the last summit before nag-adjourn for lunch. Sa totoo lang, hindi ko na tinapos. Pero pinakinggan ko yung opening statements ni Prime Minister Hun Sen, statement of Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao, followed by the Korean President. Hindi ko na inabutan yung kay Prime Minister Noda. Anyway, yung kay Noda na sinabi niya doon sa Japan Summit, pwede ko rin ibahagi sa inyo kung interesado kayo doon. Pero baka naman marami na kayong balita sa ngayon. Okay, ASEAN plus 3 na lang muna. No? Ang context niyan is yung 1997 financial crisis. Kasi the ASEAN plus 3 was formed in the aftermath of the 1997. Yan yung nagbagsakan yung mga property prices sa Thailand, di ba? Tapos yung sa atin, nag-trigger ng depreciation of the peso from 29 to 40. Naalala nyo yun? Na dahil doon yung Skyway hanggang Bikutan na lang. Yung MRT hanggang SM EDSA North imbis na hanggang Monumento. Yun yung mga inabutan ng Asian crisis. So, the context for the ASEAN plus 3, yung tatlong bansa kasi, China, Korea, and Japan, are advanced countries in terms of economic development, and they were in a position to support yung mga ASEAN countries. So ito yung sinabi ni Premier Wen Jiabao. He referred to the 240 billion credit pool that was established. Ang tawag nila dito yung Chiang Mai Initiative. There's also an emergency rice reserve consisting of 800 million tons. And then he talked about the following, yung proposals ng China, boost the capacity of ASEAN for coping with crisis, actively cultivate an ASEAN bond market, and consider the establishment of a regional investment bank. And he also expressed the willingness of China to contribute to a special fund for the RCEP, yung Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership that will be launched later dito sa ASEAN Summit. And all-round cooperation on Asian connectivity. Si President of Korea naman, sabi niya, of all the crises, financial crisis has the most impact. We need to establish social safety nets that will bring into motion preventive actions against potential liquidity problems. So he mentioned again the 240 billion credit pool established for this purpose. Yun, support din for the Asian bond market, the importance of food security as embodied in this emergency rice reserve. And he said that the ASEAN plus 3 is a role model for regional cooperation. Okay, yung kay Noda. Ito, si Noda pala, Noda, Prime Minister Noda on the ASEAN-Japan. Japan has pursued the paths of peace. On the South China Sea, we have a common concern. This has a direct impact on peace and stability in the region. We need to clarify the claims. Na-mention din niya yung paggamit ng parameters ng UNCLOS. We should refrain from taking unilateral action, comply with international law, early completion of the COC, and importance of confidence building measures. Then he said that the Japan-China relationship at present is difficult, but that the two countries are communicating with each other because they are determined to maintain peace and stability. Tapos sinabi din niya, North Korea should demonstrate its commitment to the six-party framework. Yun. Then we must strengthen dialogue and exchange. Okay. Tanong pa. Wala na bang tanong? Kumain na ako ng 3 klaseng puto doon sa listening room.
Thank you.
Okay? Sige. Maraming po salamat. Okay.